Okay, fine. Then fine. Ma'am, can you confirm if the PPT is visible?
Yeah, it's visible.
Okay, fine. So we'll get started, right? And 1 minute. Okay, fine. So let's get started. So yesterday, what we saw primarily was how the entire problem statement has to be formulated, has to be fine-tuned, and then you can come to a solution. That solution might not be a working solution.
Is anyone able to hear Ishan?
Ishan, are you there? Ishan, we couldn't hear you. Okay, I think some internet issue. Just a second.
I'm sorry, just a minute. It seems he has some internet issue. He'll be like rejoining in 1 minute.
Hello, am I audible? I'm sorry. Sorry. I'll just share my screen. Fine. Is it fine now?
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay, sure. Fine. So let's get started with these three terms, okay? And I'm sure you must have come across this term either before this session or even during this session multiple number of times, right? So there are three terms that I've used here: UX, which stands for user experience, right? UI, which stands for user interface; CX, which stands for customer experience, right? So these three terms actually have different meanings and are used in different contexts to understand how the user reacts or what is the user requirement, and a lot of other aspects as well, right? So let's get started. So if any one of you have any doubts or anything to add, you can please unmute and probably unmute and say, or you can even add in the message. So let's talk about UI first, right? Because UI is a small set, okay, and UX is a superset of UI. So let's understand the smaller set first, which is UI, right? So UI, whatever we have seen yesterday with respect to the visual design, right, where the app is there, how are the buttons placed in the app, what are the different color schemes that you have used in the app. So all that thing actually translates to the user interface. Interface basically means the platform or through the medium which the user is interacting with the system, right? So in most of the internet driven products that we see, the interface is mostly web app or a mobile app, right? So they focus on the visual design aspects, like where the button has to be placed, what are the distance and all those aspects, right? I think can any one of you just tell one rule or one design principle or one law what we saw with respect to the visual design? Not in my session, maybe any session which happened yesterday. This is just to test whether all of you are not sleeping, right? Anyone?
No, we are listening.
Okay, fine. You're listening, but one, yeah, aesthetic appeal, yeah, fine. Color, Yeah, we saw some laws, right? By some laws. I don't want to name.
Hierarchy of information. Just all. Yeah.
That is absolutely right. There somebody said Miller
Miller's
rule.
law,
Yeah.
Miller's law, task law.
Then there was something called as Fitz's rule also, right? So those rules, if you saw, right, they actually deal with how the medium has to be designed. The medium can be an app, it can be a web app. So those things actually are centered or focus on the user interface, right? So they focus on how the user should be interacting with the app. What are the buttons? What are the different number of options that has to be displayed to the user, right? So those are the aspects which are covered in the user interface. So you can see typography, the fonts, the layout, what has to be the layout for convenient readability, convenient usability, graphic design, color. So if you see, right, there are these job profiles. In designer, you will see various types of roles in the designer domain out there, in the professional world out there. So you see there are these graphic designers, there are these website designers. So all those aspects are actually covered under the user interface, right? So now let's see what UX is. UX actually goes a step further, and it tells what is the experience that the user is having or that the user had while using the application, or basically the application in this case is the solution, right? So what are the various experiences that the user had while using the app, like I said. So for example, let's consider this Zomato, right? Let's consider the case study of Zomato. So the Zomato app can actually follow all the design rules, the visual design rules, what we saw in the last, or you can say in the yesterday's session, which covered various Fitts law and all those laws. So let's assume the Zomato app actually follows all those rules, right? And it is actually visually appealing, very easy to use. But what happens when you're trying to book the order or when you're trying to place the order? The order is not going to the required restaurant, or the order is not getting properly executed, right? Or they do not have the scalability so that they cannot actually serve you the solution. So you see, those things are beyond the mobile app that you have used. And because the entire experience of you as a user trying to order food online gets affected, no matter how good the app is, how beautiful the app is, but the entire end-to-end experience gets affected, you can say the user experience goes for a toss, right? So I have tried to tell you, you can have a very good UI for your solution, but if you do not have a good user experience, that's what ultimately going to matter, right? If you do not have a good user experience, you are more likely not to recommend this product to your friends and family. So user experience actually deals with the entire interaction design, how you as a user are going to interact with the system, right? So interface basically tells there is one medium of interacting. That medium can be a mobile app, but interaction design tells you that there can be a lot of other means as well to interact with the system. The mobile app is just one such interface, one such solution. So I hope you're able to understand, visualize, right, that UI is a subset of UX. UX is the bigger set out there. So in UX, that is when you need to design the solution. So yesterday's session, when I was talking about designing the problem, designing the solution, and from the design thinking point of view, UX actually encompasses that entire design thinking approach, right? Even in case of Ola, how the Ola app is actually going to schedule different drivers which are close to your area. How is it going to manage so many different customers in that particular area? Maybe a first come first serve, the one who orders books the order first gets the cab delivery first. So there are a lot of things which is happening in the background as part of the system which is beyond the app. So you as a user are not exposed to anything beyond the app. But what happens, the things which are running beyond the app are more important, or you can say more critical, to ensure how you as a user are going to have an experience. That is nothing but the user experience, right? So in the UX is the part where we have whatever we talked about yesterday, the user research, right? What is the background? What is the what is your preference, and have you ordered a lot of food or a lot of things in the past, your past orders, all that tracking, all that data. So knowing the user in this case becomes very important to be able to understand the user well and give him an experience that is so that he can recommend you. So that is how the product popularity also grows, product popularity and the product adoption. So user experience is the thing which we should all be talking about more than the user interface when we talk about the solution, or rather when you talk about coming to a solution to a problem statement. UI is good. UI is strictly limited to the design, to the visual design, but then there is a logical design aspect which the company takes care into consideration while designing the product, right? So UX deals with that aspect of the entire product. So I hope you have cleared the difference between UX and UI. So now, after getting cleared with UX and UI, let's go to CX. Now, customer experience. Now, this is the place where your branding, your pricing, your aspects like customer service comes into picture, right? For example, now let me take an example of Apple products and non-Apple products. Now, clearly, Apple has a branding that many companies fail to match, right? So more users are you can say will be I'm not talking about affordability, that's a different concept altogether, but if you would just gift a product to anyone, and if it's an Apple product, obviously the receiver will be very happy just because of the branding and the sort of advertising and the sort of environment they have created around their products. That is what customer experience is. So right, customer experience actually, many of us might not have exactly used the Apple products, correct? Say for example, I have not used Apple products, so I have had no interaction with Apple UI, correct? I have had no experience with Apple user experience as well, because I have never used the Apple product. But because how powerful their branding is, their advertising is, I'll be naturally inclined to be using the Apple product in the future, even without having a first-hand experience of the UX and UI. So that is how powerful CX is. So to put in a nutshell, this is the entire concept. UI is the smallest set, which deals with the aspect of your visual design, where the app is designed, how the layout, how the topography, how the color scheme is going to be. UX deals with how you're going to be approaching the problem statement, how you're going to be designing a solution for that. That involves analysis, that involves strategy. It starts with user and market research, right? And then you have to architect your lot of data and lot of solution, and this is when the entire decision making process comes. So whatever we saw yesterday as part of the design thinking actually falls into the bucket of user experience, correct? And then we see what is this customer experience. Customer experience is basically the superset, which involves UI plus UX plus advertising, branding, sales process, business strategy, and all those aspects, right? So you really can't say that we are one is probably more important than other. A product truly becomes successful if it tries to ace all those three aspects, right? So I hope I'm clear. Great. So cool. Yeah. So now we have the UX design. Like I told you, UX design is a much more broader concept than the UI design. It goes much beyond the visual aesthetics. And if you see, it has various subsets. Your interface, like I told you, the medium, how you're going to be providing a solution, right? We see a lot of real world problems around us, right? Most of the problems nowadays are designed as a app-based solution, but that may not be always the case. So interface actually tells you what is the medium through which you're trying to solve the problem. So the most of the case, what we see around us these days is app. So app here becomes the interface, and then you basically apply all the interface design rules to ensure that your app is usable, more usable. Then you have the navigation. Navigation basically tells you how you are going to be navigating through the medium, or you can say how you're going to be navigating through the solution or the product that they have offered. This is very important from the usability point of view. You should not be lost while using any solution or any product. Then structuring, like I told you, there has to be a hierarchy of data, there has to be a hierarchy of workflow, right? Before the use of any product, you should be given the registration. They cannot ask you to use the product first and then register, right? So that is the structural part of the product. Then has the design part, design phase. Like I told you, it involves everything, right from formulating the problem statement to formulating your assessment metric. How are you going to measure how good your product is? So that part comes in. So design is a very broad bucket. So that's design. HCI again, so you can say design is a smaller subset of HCI over here, because your main goal is to have a efficient human computer interaction. So if you can say you ace your interface, you ace your navigation, you ace your user design and all those aspects, you can very well be assured that you're going to ace your HCI as well. Then, like I said, user research, usability, accessibility, all these things ultimately come under the bucket of UX design, right? So I hope I'm clear on this. Shall we go ahead? So I'll be stopping the topic of user interface, user experience, and all the things related to design thinking, right? We'll go on to another new topic. Like I told you, the topic broadly was design thinking and AI. Now we'll go on to the aspect of AI, right? Surprisingly, I do not have much interactions and questions from you people today. So are you people already tired? It's only day 2 here. We have probably 3 more days to go.
No, we are here.
Yes, glad. Yeah,
No,
glad to see you.
no, sir. Your talk is very interesting. So
Then-
there will be same. We'll continue the same interaction like yesterday.
Definitely, because I already see a drop in the energy levels, so that's why. So
No, nothing.
great,
Please,
great.
please continue.
So, Ishan, just to put it simply, just please correct me if I'm wrong. The whole research execution process flow comes under the UX. How to package that service and present it to the customer for use is under UI. And
No,
how
that is-
customer
okay,
perceives
yeah.
that entire product or branding that comes under customer experience.
Correct. So you see, if you see a user is ultimately a customer,
Of course.
correct. So the customer experience is the biggest bucket.
Correct.
And if you say that a user is having a great customer experience, or you can say there's a great customer experience out there, you can naturally break it down saying it had a great UX and it had a great UI as well. Because it had a great UI, you can very well add a few concepts, and you can say you can have a good UX, and then on top of that good UX, if you have a good branding, you have a good pricing, you have a good business strategy, you can ultimately have a good customer experience. So that was the entire logical you can say the Venn diagram. Great.
Yeah.
We miss out on the content. Okay, sure. So I understood Aditi ma'am's thing. So it's not drop in energy, it's a more strategic move that you as an audience are having this time around. Great. It's fine. So now we move on to the concept of artificial intelligence, right? And how artificial intelligence is related to HCI. So don't worry, ma'am, we'll cover it quickly today, because I got experience of what it was yesterday. So we'll cover it quickly so that we can have time for Q&A later on. Okay, so there's something called as pervasive computing. Okay, now if you see what pervasive as a word means, it means that existing everywhere. So logically, to a layman, what pervasive computing would naturally mean is computing which is existing everywhere, computing which is there around us everywhere. So it's not something that is, you can say, confined. Computing is definitely not confined to only your laptops and your computers and your supercomputers, right? So pervasive computing says that computing is everywhere around you. It embodies the future of network computing, enabling wireless communication between individuals and computing device. So now how this is actually executed, or how the solution is actually offered, is there are these very tiny microprocessors, okay, embedded into the everyday objects. It can be home, it can be car, it can be your clothes, it can be anything, and that is also a computer, right? So we often fail to, or you can say fail to acknowledge that our washing machine, our watch, right, our these times even the wearable devices, everything has computers in it. Now, just because they are not the typical computers what we use for our professional laptop desktops, doesn't mean they are not categorized into computing. So everything around us is computing. That is what the concept of pervasive computing is. So there are three main aspects of pervasive computing. The first aspect is natural interaction. Now, what I mean by natural interaction is that when you are using spreading widely throughout an area, definitely correct, yeah. So what I mean by natural interaction is when you are interacting with your desktop or when you're interacting with your laptop, it's definitely not a natural interaction by any means. You're using GUI, you are using mouse, you are using keyboard. I'm telling you, I am more of a human person than a human, than a computer person. So I don't really enjoy spending my time on computers. I would rather go out of my room, talk to my parents. Maybe that is also for a while, and maybe then I have to go out of my house and talk to people. So that is what I am as a person. Exactly. So the entire idea of pervasive computing is not just to spread the computing world around us everywhere, but to make it natural. Because you could just say, you can have computers and desktops and laptops all around you. That is only going to make the situation worse. So the idea is you have more compute devices around you, because it's going to make your life simple. We'll see how it makes our life simple. We'll just see in the upcoming slides. But more importantly, you should not feel that you are interacting with a computer, because honestly, that's not a really interesting, that's not a very fun experience. You should feel that you are having a natural experience. So that is why the natural interaction becomes very important aspect of pervasive computing. Now let's look at the second aspect, that is called the proactivity. So now the whole purpose of surrounding yourself or having these so many compute devices in terms of being embedded in your, like I said, everyday objects like home, car, watches. The purpose is that it has to be intelligent and it can help you assist in your day-to-day activities. Right? For example, you have this with the COVID-19 pandemic and everything, people became very conscious about your BP rate, your heartbeat rate, your oximeter levels. So what happened? These companies very smartly started making more and more devices, and these are not really big devices that you have to carry. These devices are basically, you can say, your watch or something very, very, very small, or it can be an app also, which actually helps you with this BP rate, with your heartbeat rate, with your oxygen saturation level. So that's the whole idea. These devices have a purpose. They have to be really smart and they have to help you achieve your everyday goals. Correct? So that is what I mean by proactivity. It can be activity detection. Right? There are many apps and solutions which help you count the number of steps you have. Right? And that is actually helping you for your fitness regime. And then there is behavioral modeling, there is need prediction. Need prediction can be, probably it just monitors. And like I told you, these are smart devices. The whole idea of surrounding oneself with a lot of compute devices is to make your life simpler, right? So if your BP rate is very high, or you are there's a high heartbeat, that actually implies that you might be going through a stress. It can give you some sort of a suggestion or some sort of a solution, or lot of aspects. So that is what I actually mean by proactivity. It is constantly observing you. So that's the whole point. So natural interaction, we saw that we want it to be natural interaction. We don't want to make it feel like we are interacting with a computer. Second, it has to understand you. It has to monitor your various level of activities and help you with those data what it has collected and analyzed. Third aspect is, like I told you, it's called ubiquity. What this does is it ensures that these devices are mobile. Number one, that means it's easy to carry. They are ambient. They are part of a bigger network. So what I actually mean is you have these embedded devices. So let me not give you another example, because I'll be talking about that example later on. But say, for example, you have one device that is monitoring your BP rate. There is one device that is monitoring your SpO2. There is one device which is monitoring your say step counts. Now, if there is a network, just imagine if there is a network, right? All these different aspects can be analyzed at the same place Exactly. I think Apple Watch does that, right? So it's basically saying you have all the solution under one roof. So what happens? See, if you analyze only SpO2, see, we have that SpO2 device, right? That white color device. That is not part of the watch or something. So what happens? You will have that. Then you will have exactly the oximeter. Then you will have the BP machine. What happens? You might, first thing is, as a user, you have to have these physical devices separately. Number two, you have to analyze, you have to take the readings individually, and you have to come to your own conclusion, or you have to go to a doctor or something. I'm not saying the use of these smart devices eliminates the use of going to doctor, but what I'm telling you is, if all these devices are synchronized in a network, then you get a comprehensive view of your health. In this particular example, health, because I told you we have seen a lot of SpO2 and then your heartbeat and your BP rate. So what happens if you take all these parameters into consideration? Only then you will be able to understand how a user is actually feeling. But for example, if I only take SpO2 and my SpO2 is really good, that does not indicate whether I'm going through a high blood pressure or not, or high stress or not. So that's the whole point. What it says, the network information, what it says is, there has to be a network in which these small devices are interconnected. So when the solution is provided to you, or when there is an analysis of your health, in this particular case, it takes into consideration the data that is received by all these individual devices. So I hope the entire concept and the requirement of pervasive computing is clear. So to put it formally out there, there's a growing trend of embedding computational capability, generally in the form of microprocessors. These are very tiny processors, okay, into everyday objects, to make them effectively communicate and perform useful tasks, which is ultimately to improve your day-to-day activities. Correct? This minimizes the users, and users need to interact with the computers as computers. See, the whole, what's the best part? When you interact with these sensors, or when you interact with these, you can say oximeter, or the inbuilt oximeter, and all those devices, you are unaware that you are interacting with them. I think that's the whole point. You do not log into something, type in a username, type in a password, then probably 2-3 more buttons, and then so that is actually how a user is or how a human is interacting with a computer. But the entire concept of pervasive computing is that the user should be interacting with a computer, but he should not be realizing it, because it is very automatic and very natural. I think the purpose is clear. And like I told you, pervasive computing devices are network connected, because they have to constantly be in sync with various other devices, or the various other sources of information that is being collected and analyzed. Okay, so this is, I'm sure all of you know, this is Amazon Echo Dot. Probably one of you can tell me what is the use of this? How does this work? And how is it different from radio? Right, because I believe this has millions of songs or whatever. How is this different from a radio? Okay, very, very good. Adapt and learn. Here, adapt is a very big key word here in this entire context. Anything else? Very good, very good. That's natural language interaction. Obviously, you cannot ask your radio that play some song, and the radio is just going to stay still, right? So it learns your lifestyle and choices and adapts accordingly. That's very beautifully put. So you see, this is how artificial intelligence based solutions actually improve your human computer interaction. In fact, when my sister she started using Alexa initially, she didn't even realize it's a machine or it's a computer. It's a black box, right? It's a magical black box. You don't even realize that there is a computer in it, and the way it is supposed to interact, or the way it is designed, is to give you a human feel. You are not supposed to log in, sit on a computer, take in your keyboard, type something. No, that's the whole point of pervasive computing. You need to eliminate all those aspects, and the idea is how the advancement in artificial intelligence can lead to a better and easier human computer interaction.
Siri and Bixby also.
Sorry?
Siri and Bixby.
Definitely. So these are basically called the artificial intelligence assistants, AI assistant, right? And they have to be as natural as possible. So yes. So one biggest takeaway was adapt and learn. It learns your behavior and it customizes the solution for you. So the songs it might play for you are very different from the songs it might play for your friends or someone else. And when a user is actually given a solution which is very tailor made for him, obviously we as a user are going to feel important. We as a user are going to feel more privileged, right? So they have taken this basic human psychology and they have actually mixed up, or they have done a marriage with the domain of AI to provide that sort of a package solution, what we as a user ultimately want. Correct. Personalized experience. So personalized experience is going to improve your user experience, which ultimately you can say is going to improve your customer experience. So to put it formally out there, the technology should be invisible or hidden from sight. Now to be honest, I come from an artificial intelligence background, right? So I am continuously or actively involved in the research which goes into AI. Now what happens, the AI, the domain is very complex. In fact, to be honest, it is all about maths and statistics. It becomes very messy out there with all the equations, so many complex models or solutions out there. But the tact is, when you package this solution and put it in front of the user should not even feel that the entire AI technology is concept, because for him it is just, he will give a command and the machine has to respond with a suitable solution, right? So the technology should be invisible and hidden from the sight. You should not even feel that you are using a very complex high-tech technology around you. So that's the entire purpose of pervasive computing, to develop information appliances that fits into people's need and lives. Like I told you, there was a need for measuring BP, there was a need of measuring oximeter, oxygen saturation level. So these devices are helping you with your everyday activities. But nowadays what happened, people are actually first developing a AI based solution, and then they are actually going to find the user who will use it. Now that's a bad approach. You must always find the problem and then come up with a solution. But these days people are first developing a product, and then they are on a hunt to going on for a hunt and asking people, please use my product. So that's not how it works. So to do this, the companies must change the way they develop products. So they need to start with understanding the user. So that's the number one requirement, right? Like I said, again, with COVID, people have become very health conscious. So the way the companies have behaved, or you can say how they have reacted in the past 1 year, is very different, because they have seen, because of COVID, there are new business opportunities. Why? Because the people's lifestyle has changed. Why? Because the people started behaving differently. Now they are more health conscious, right? So you can see how people behave today is very different from how people behaved before COVID. Or let me put it, how people behave today is very different from how people behaved even 10 years back. So because the user behavior is changing, the user psychology is changing, the companies must also change their way of developing the products. So for this, they have to understand the user first, apply design thinking process that we saw yesterday, look at the domain by domain basis, case by case basis. So the biggest takeaway, if I were a company, if I were to have a startup, or if I were to make a product tomorrow, it would be to understand the user first and then come up with the technology later, right? So the entire so if you see about this entire picture, if I show it to an engineer, or if I show it to a student, if I show it to some computer science student, right, he will look at this from an AI perspective. He will be very fascinated with the AI concepts and the AI advancement that has gone into it. But if I probably show it to, say, a product manager or a designer out there, he might be able to appreciate the purpose of this product, right? So once he understands the purpose of this product, what problem it is trying to solve, then he might later on be interested, okay, what is happening inside this box? That is the AI, right? So the point is, you as a product designer or a developer, you should understand the product first. For understanding the product first, you need to understand the user for whom you're making the product, and only then you care about the technology later on. Fine. So users do not care about what inside the black box, as long as the box does what they say or what they need. Okay. So what is this? Anyone? Okay. Smart home.
Smart.
Home automation.
Home automation. Okay, great. IoT, definitely great.
Yeah.
Correct. So this is basically an example of smart home. And like somebody pointed out, Aisha ma'am, that it's a IoT based solution, correct? Now, again, as I told you, when you look at this picture, if you show it to an engineer, he will say IoT, he will say artificial intelligence, he will say embedded computing, he will say computer networks. But you show it to some other person who has been in the industry, or you can say a product designer who is probably, or you can say a CEO or a co-founder of a company, he will look at this picture as a product or a solution that is trying to solve something. So I'm not saying IoT is definitely the right answer, because ultimately it is the IoT. If you do not have IoT, you will not have the smart home concept. In fact, the reason why smart homes, the Alexa, Siri, they did not exist 10 years back or 20 years back is the reason because there was no AI, or the AI was very nascent. It was not developed at all, right? So AI, IoT becomes the foundation. But what happens when you try to look at a product from the engineering point of view or the engineering aspects, you might miss out the bigger picture. And the bigger picture is the customer requirement, the customer need. Because just because AI is there, you don't want to tweak AI and make a product out of it. You actually need to find a solution. So you actually need to find a problem statement to begin with. So this is the example of smart home, and there are multiple ways it is trying to do the home automation as mentioned. So you can see there is the smoke detector, there is the inlet switch, there are a lot of motion sensors, door sensor. For example, your air conditioner, it should not be it's a pain to actually switch it on, once you're coming after a very busy day in the office. You're trying to figure out what is the best temperature for you. What if everything is automated, right? What if everything, when you come back from the office, the garage and the home, the garage or the gate, your house gate, it opens automatically, and all these things, if they are connected via a network, one trigger through the home gate, because that's the first entry point, that might automatically go and trigger your air conditioner and other or it can automatically go and switch on your lights, because now they know that the user or the person is actually going to come into the home. So that is how the devices should be connected. It's not important just to be smart, they have to be connected. Home applying control even if one is not I didn't understand what is the point, ma'am?
No,
Shilpa ma'am?
as a service, they're just trying to elevate the whole home living and control experience in terms of safety, even if somebody is not there. Or
Correct,
before they reach home, they can just switch on
Correct.
whatever they want to. So
Definitely.
it's elevating the entire customer experience eventually.
Definitely, like we saw with the case of Ola, it has not just elevated the user experience, it has also ensured safety, right? With this OTP matching and stuff. The same concept can be applied here as well, So that is the whole point. These devices are not just smart individually, they are connected through a network, and they all combine in various fashion or in various capabilities together to provide you a better user experience. Again, these are only examples. I'm not endorsing these products, right? So pervasive computing is a post-desktop model of human-computer interaction, where you do not even realize that you are actually interacting with a computer. It is very natural, and all the information processing has been thoroughly integrated with your everyday objects. Like I told you, these devices, they take your information and they have to process the information and analyze it. So there's a whole lot of computing that is going behind the user, even without the user understanding or being aware of it. So that's the whole purpose of serving the master or serving the user better. So during the course of these ordinary activities, the end user using pervasive computing engages with multiple computational devices and systems simultaneously, and may not necessarily be aware of he is doing that. So that's the whole purpose. So as aptly put forward, pervasive computing is defined as machines that fit into the human environment instead of forcing humans to enter the machine environment. So this is one of the biggest takeaways that I have for you guys in this session of HCI and AI. just because AI is there everywhere around us, just because it's the hottest trend out there, it does not necessarily mean that whatever domain, you know, whether it's agriculture based or manufacturing based or any domain, you force AI into things. No, you have to see the problem first, and then when you truly understand the problem, you try to come up with different solutions. And if AI can help you implement that one of those solutions, then only you go for a AI based solution, right? So the machines have to naturally fit into the human environment. So like I told you, pervasive computing is one of the latest and the hottest research topics in AI field. So if any one of you is interested, you can probably explore more on this term. Yeah. So now that we have looked at the concept of what is pervasive computing is, there are various agents that enable this pervasive computing. One is the processing. Like I told you, your data has to be captured by various processors, and they have to be not the data capturing, the data processing. Like I told you, you might actually take the oximeter layer, saturation layer, you know, readings throughout the entire day. If it is embedded into a watch, that thing might take the readings every 5 minutes or every 1 hour maybe, and then it has to process it and analyze it. Is it okay? You know, or probably it can say for the past 1 week your oxygen saturation has been consistently below 95. Okay, the week before that it was consistently 98, 99, so it was better, but last week probably it is consistently around 95 or less than 95. So the entire processing and analyzing can give you a good indication that what might happen next, right? So processing is a very crucial aspect of pervasive computing, and it is enabled by very small, very fast and very small energy efficient processors. Okay, so I come from a processor based company, AMD. There are many companies like Intel, Nvidia. We are constantly into autonomous vehicles and all those things. So so we are, you can say, we are coming from the processing aspect of the pervasive computing. The second is storage. Obviously, like I told you, if the data is being constantly captured on a real-time basis, there will be so much data. So you have to store that data somewhere, and only then you can process it. So for that, we need a lot of processors, a lot of storage devices that can help us with the automatic computing. Third is networking. Like I told you, everything has to be networked. The entire device has to be networked with the entire bigger, you can say the bigger smart home sort of a network. Like I told you, these are interconnected device. These are very intelligent device, but they are not very intelligent or very smart individually. Only when you connect all of them through a network and they can work in sync, only then you can actually achieve your goal of pervasive computing. So we need networking devices. There has to be high bandwidth. Because if the data is not processed, or you can say the data is not, you know, communicated in the real time because of poor network connectivity, then the entire concept of smart home goes for a toss. Then sensors. Sensors are the first thing that can be embedded in your, you know, your clothes, your shoes, your car, your home. The role of the sensor is basically to capture the data, and they're the first trigger point with the user. Then display. You can have multiple displays. Your, for example, your Apple Watch has that display. That is one example of a display. Your car, your car have that entertainment display, and that the best part is they have used it beyond entertainment as well. Any warning or any sort of a emergency also gets displayed on that entertainment display. And actuators. So actuators are basically if there's a sort of a requirement. Say for example, there has to be a pulley, or there has to be something which has to get automated after say 1 hour or something. Or you can say the say the washing machine. I'm going to sleep now. The washing machine can let it start after say 2 hours. So let me not stay awake, and let me not actually control it manually. It can get controlled automatically. So these are the various agents that are required to enable pervasive computing. So again, like I told you, this is the entire flowchart of pervasive computing. You're going to have these are the pervasive computing applications. The applications can be mobile app or whatever, through which you want to control your say AC or control your whatever part of your home. Now, how you're going to achieve it basically is using IoT applications. So these IoT applications will internally use sensors and embedded computing to do the final functionality, right? And then again, there will be a response. So the user is on this end, you can say on the lower end, and the upper end is the compute elements, which are ultimately going to do their functionalities. Yeah, so this is one very important quote that I want to share with you. We already have a critical mass of devices and wireless networks, correct? So you can say even 10 years back or even 5 years back, we did have all these sensors, we did have all these wireless networks, right? But the most important step is to make those devices aware of how humans work and get them to adapt to their habits, correct? Isn't this the entire concept of we say the device learning to adapt to human behaviors? So we already had all those devices in place, just that we need to make those devices, get to know how the humans operate. So again, this is an example of the progressive computing what we saw. The smart spaces and the mobile applications that the user is ultimately going to have in his hand to control the smart home, for example, is the interface. Like I told you, interface is just a medium in which the solution is implemented, right? Then, like I told you, when I go to my smart home, I just say switch on light and all those things, the way I interact with humans. Or you can say the motion-based sensor, where the AC is actually saying there has been motion for the last 1 hour or half an hour. Let's switch off the AC for efficient power consumption. That actually becomes a way of rich natural media, natural HCI interaction. Basically, you don't have to sit on a keyboard or log into a system to interact with those devices. Sorry, yeah. Then, like I told you, the software infrastructure. You might need a lot of chips, processors, a lot of those aspects, IoT-based devices to enable pervasive computing. That comes as part of computing. And like I told you, the sensor network, it is very important for these devices to be connected over a network. These are some of the areas of HCI in pervasive computing, which which if you feel interested, you can go and explore. So one is natural interface. This part deals with the human speech, gestures, handwriting recognition. So these parts help in understanding the humans and taking the normal the human-like input rather than keyboard-based or rather than text-based. Context awareness. These smart devices have to be aware of your location, aware of what is the context in which the device has to operate. Third is the automatic capture and access. That is, it can basically have a live recording, or you can say live monitoring of the user to continuously assess and give a better user experience to the user. And there's something called as human factored AI. We'll come to what human factored AI is next. So this is the benefit of pervasive computing in a nutshell. It's invisible, right? The computing has to be invisible. That's the whole point. Socialization. You have to, you have to socialize with the machines. So it's no longer a headache that you might have. You have to sit on your chair and it has to be an explicit computer interaction. No, it is very normal. It fits into your human routine. Decision-making capability, emergent behavior, information processing. There has to be information process, enhanced experience, and convergence. It has to converge, or it has to be aligned to your day-to-day activities. Okay, so now we look at the last topic for today, that is AI in HCI, empathy-driven products. Okay, so let me try to summarize this graph. So what this graph shows is the development of artificial intelligence over the past, you can say 60-70 years, right? Because HCI as a topic or HCI as a subject was always there. How humans interacted with computers was always there since a long time, right? You can say with Steve Jobs inventing the Mac, right? That was actually very instrumental in enabling all of us, all of the normal users, to have desktop and laptops in our home. Because before 1980s, it was something only the scientists and the lot of mathematicians used to have computers in their life, for their professional research and experience. But with the advent of how Steve Jobs actually revolutionized this entire concept of design, he brought the same compute power what initially used to capture the size of the computers long back used to take the entire size of the room, but he brought similar compute power in the shape of a desktop. right? So these devices have actually changed how we user behave in our day-to-day life. Right now we cannot imagine even a single day without a compute device. The compute device can be mobile or or a laptop or a desktop, but before 1980s that was only used by the scientists and mathematicians. So this graph actually shows the development of AI, and somehow you see there are these low hanging curves which actually did not allow the AI and HCI intersection to be good enough. Because if your AI and HCI interaction is not good enough, AI winters. Okay, so what I mean by AI winters is that phase where AI development was not good, or there was a stall in the AI research. Like I told you, if you see Alexa, or if you see that Alexa Echo, ultimately it's a machine learning powered solution. But imagine if the machine learning solution was not there today, we would never have Alexa. So AI winter basically says, or basically tells the phase where AI research was slow or AI research was stagnant, right? So only if you see from 2000s, from the internet bubble especially, AI research has started taking a upper turn from there on, and that has actually enabled the AI and HCI domain to converge to give a better user experience. I hope I'm clear on that, right? So the thing is, you can only design AI based solutions if you have a AI research in place. But if you do not have AI research in place, how are you going to make a solution which which is going to make the human experience better? So this is the reason why we see a lot of AI based products, especially in the last 5-7 years, helping the user experience. No, it's not because of that. Like I told you, for example, even when Zomato or Ola came in the beginning, I'm sure in the first 1 year of the product launch, people might have been still skeptical about the use, but gradually people start adopting it. But the reason why there was no AI and HCI, AI HCI based product before 2000, especially before 2000, you can say before 2000, because the AI research was not there in place. So in the last 10 years, the AI research has taken a tremendous turn, and that is why we are seeing more AI based products to our service. I hope I'm clear on that, right? Yeah, but this is a problem. This is a natural problem, right? People do not really accept things as quickly as we want them to. Things take time. The adoption takes time. Okay, so like I told you, there's this concept we will be discussing. It's called HAI. It's called human centered AI. Okay, can you somebody tell me what they can infer from this diagram out here?
The AI is adapted and designed as per the humans, not the other way around. Like design thinking, human behavior and patterns are absolutely centered as per the natural human use, and I think the technology is adapted and designed exactly to feel normal, to a human person.
Exactly. So like this point you actually mentioned just now, users might not be accepting and adaptive before. See, that happens because if you introduce a technology which is way out of your imagination, or it does not, you don't require it, you might feel your life is structured around the technology.
Correct.
But what companies like Zomato, for example, Zomato or Ola or all these startups, what you see, or the online banking payment, they saw that you have a void in your life. You might not be very, you can say, critical of that void. It's like the users themselves many times do not know what they want. They might be suffering because they do not really see that as a suffering.
Right. It's identifying the gaps basically in between the.
Correct. And most of the times these are unsaid gaps. The user might not explicitly come and tell you. Nobody told in the 1980s that I want internet.
Yeah, that's why they change the way you are doing the regular things in a very different way, which makes your life easy.
Correct. So the concept of you see the diagram on the right side. The technology has to be embedded into the everyday life of humans. Only then the humans or the user will easily accept and adapt to the product like never before.
Correct.
So this is human-centered AI. Then you use natural communications amongst humans consisting primarily of mix of speech. It can be signal, it can be voice signal, or your hand gestures, or it can also be facial expressions. So you see, when you are actually communicating through these mediums, you do not even realize that you're actually communicating with a computer, right? These are complex multimodalities that provide complementary ways to convey the information with richer context. Now, I'll tell you one of my common experience. We'll make it very quick. When I interact with my friends over WhatsApp, right? Suppose you do not use the emojis. Back when WhatsApp started, emojis were not there. It was only text based. Now tell me, when you use something in a very sarcastic way, or something in a funny way, but you just type it out, it does not actually convey the feeling behind the text. Correct? Exactly. It can, most of the times I have seen people breaking up, or relationships getting breaking up because lot of text based, continuous use of WhatsApp, Telegram, and all those things, because your
Because
feelings.
they are just reading the words. They are not
Okay.
able to judge your tone or your intent.
Exactly. So that is
Yes,
where this.
basically.
Exactly. That is very well put, ma'am. That is exactly where this information with richer context makes the communication easy and effective. Now, what I mean by multimodality is basically a way of giving input. So multimodality means you can give input through your speech, through your expressions, through your body movements, gestures. That is what I mean by multimodalities. So AI is powering speech based. You can say Alexa. Then they have gesture based. There's a project solely from Google. Probably you people can Google about this project from Google. So there are a lot of things which are fundamentally changing how user interact with the system, and this actually boils down to artificial intelligence. Right? I hope I'm clear. So this is the concept of human centered AI. So you have to make AI based solutions which are fitting into the everyday life of human, and not the other way around. So yeah, so there are three key aspects of HAI, human-centered AI. One is ethically aligned design. So ethically aligned design, which says that you can create a AI solution, that's fine, but that AI system has to be, it should avoid discrimination, maintain fairness, and do justice. And more importantly, any AI system should not be there to replace the humans. So we see a lot of news articles these days saying because of automation and because of AI, there can be a lot of jobs lost, in the next 10 years or so. But technically, AI should not be designed for that purpose. AI should be designed in such a way that if one person can complete his work in 2 days, with the use of AI based solution, he should be able to complete his work in a day or less than that. So the design of AI is not to replace humans, but to make humans' job more effective and efficient. Second is technology that fully reflects human intelligence. So this basically tells that you need to come up with an AI solution that actually mimics the human behavior, right? Or the way how you interact with human. So it should have a human intelligence. The third is, human factor design is to ensure that the AI solutions are explainable, comprehensible, useful, and usable. Like I told you, you cannot just simply make a AI product which does not solve any problem, which does not solve any real life problem, and then you keep going to customers and you request them to please use my solution, but it does not solve any problem. So the AI solution should be usable and should solve a real world problem. So yeah, so if you see the purpose of this framework, the framework what we saw HAI is to promote a comprehensive approach, ultimately providing people with safe, efficient, healthy, and satisfying HAI solutions. Okay, so 2-3 quick slides and then I'll be done. AI will permit everything where we go. It's going to be, in next 4 or 5 years, every solution, whether it's a HR based solution, whether it's a education based solution, or whether it's a finance, analytics, manufacturing, agriculture, AI will be there everywhere. So this is the concept, and this is the operation of AI. What it does is, what it says first, if you let's look at the right side of the right circle. What it says, it's a data driven intelligence. The left side is basically design and digital experience. One second. Sorry. Okay. Yeah, I hope it's better. Okay. So if you see, the left circle is related to the data driven intelligence and the right one is design and digital experience. So how this actually comes down or scales down to a user is, like I told, before you give a product to the user or before you design a product for a user, you need to do a lot of data analytics. Okay, that data, let's say this is the starting point, step 0. So you do a lot of data analytics, you collect data, you do a lot of research, and then you finally go and make a product. Or you go.
Ishan, you're not audible. There is an issue only.
Hello, am I not audible? Hello.
Yes. Yes.
Mercy.
Yes, sir.
Actually, okay, fine. Okay. I was getting feedback so far.
I'm audible, right? The Ishan or is Ishan audible?
Audible, sir. You're audible. So give me 5 minutes. I'll complete. I'll wrap up the session. Hello, sir. I can hear you.
Ishan.
I think some issues on source.
Ma'am, can you take it offline? I'll just complete it quickly.
Yeah, okay.
Yes. So what I was saying is, you collect a lot of data. You do a lot of data research on the user, and that is happening on the right circle. And using the data, you create a solution, a digital and a design solution for the user that is denoted by the left circle. Correct. Now, because of the design and the digital experience what the user had on the left circle, you will get a lot of feedbacks regarding what is the user behavior, or are the users liking it, or what is the trend in the user psychology. And then you are actually going to come back to your data. You're going to come back to your right circle. You're going to do simple processing of that data. For example, Facebook collects a lot of data. It denies it. That's a different thing. Facebook, Google, Amazon, they collect a lot of data. They do the processing, like you see, simple processing. There's a lot of big data, blockchain. So it is continuously collecting a lot of data to ultimately give you a design solution, which is denoted by the left circle. And again, how the user interacts with those solutions, again they get a lot of data back. So this is a continuous process, and this is how they actually are continuously improving or providing solutions that better suits the user. Like I told, the user behavior is completely different 2 years back. It is completely different today. So the solutions must also change. So this is what I meant. Okay, let's look at the next. I think there are a few more slides. So can somebody tell me what is this? What is this scene, or what is this picture?
Robot.
Yeah, it's a movie. So I've taken it basically from the popular Tamil movie Robo. Right? It was a pan-India movie, Robo. Right? Now the reason I took this particular example and I want to connect to this particular slide over here. Can anybody tell me, or you can say the connection between this human-centered AI and the concept of the movie Robo? There was something wrong with the movie, right? I mean, somehow Robo, the Robo, the city fellow, he was put in a museum, or the government decided to go against the usage of that. It went out of control. Exactly. Fine. Anything else? Anyone else? Any other? I somehow believe the interaction and the energy has gone down. Okay, Robo loves human. Okay, that's a nice answer there.
At a point, it basically started using its own mind and became highly destructive.
That's a great point. So if you see this human-centered AI, these 2 points, the first and third points, are very important. Correct. The first point is that it should not replace humans. It should only be assisting humans. Right. And the third point is, you as a scientist, you might have really good intentions of developing a robo, but because if you might not have considered some end case or some corner case, or you might have missed some a slightest flaw in your maths or in your design or whatever, the robo can get out of control. So the question is, the entire concept of human-centered AI is, if you are developing such an AI-based solution, and if the AI is actually getting out of hand, do you have a backup plan? Do you have a solution to ultimately shut the solution down, shut the robot down, or there has to be some they call it as a plan B or some sort of a thing, where even in the situation where you might not have thought the solution would behave that way, can you control it back at that point. So that is what this human centered AI actually talks about. You have to factor in a lot of scenarios where the robot can actually go against you, and you need.
I think that contingency has to be in place, because since AI being AI, it is known that if even a bit of algorithm or something goes wrong, it can totally backfire.
Totally.
So I think it has to be part of the whole design, that
Exactly.
certain parameters, wherever it starts going beyond the intended use, it should either like go into an auto shut mode, or something like it should basically stop there and then and come back to its normal utility.
That's exactly what I wanted. There has to be contingency plan. So you as a developer, you cannot say that I have developed a AI based solution and you leave off there. No, you also have to take the responsibility that if something goes wrong, what next, right? So that was that's the entire concept of human centered AI, and like somebody pointed out, ethical AI. So ethical AI actually deals with that, right? Because there was a news few months back that an AI machine, it was behaving differently to Black Americans than the other Americans. So there was some sort of discrimination in the way the AI machine was responding to the humans, right? So all that concept is.
Yeah, something happened with Facebook also, no? They had to immediately shut down everything in the backend. I heard somewhere, I'm not sure.
So your AI model has to be fair. So these are the things which we generally don't think about when we think from a technical aspect of AI. But when you're thinking from a product point of view, adoption of your product point of view, you need to think that's why the human-centered AI actually becomes a very important aspect. So like you said, that the technology or the computer science people, the researcher people, who mainly tend to focus only in the second point. They somehow miss the first and the third point, and that can lead to a massive boycott of the product and so and so. Exactly. So surgical robots, if they do mistake, what happens next, right? Then those are safety critical applications, correct? So like I told you, if you want to summarize, the role of the designers in today's generation is to build a collaborative relationship between machine and people, enabling smart systems to enhance the human creativity. So in no way the AI can replace humans, but you have to decide how collaborative relationships you can design between the machine and the people, right? After all, we understand why people or humans behave the way they do and feel like they can feel like we can predict them. Like you can understand why your mom is behaving the way she is, or why your friend is behaving the way he is, but there is no way right now in the current AI systems that we can transfer the same understanding or the same learning in AI systems. So it's basically called empathy. The AI systems today, these days, are not empathy driven. They are only data driven. They collect the data, they analyze your user behavior, so it is all data driven. But what happens when you are trying to bring AI into the human setup? We humans, we operate on feelings, right? We operate on feelings more than logic. We can probably deny it to some extent, but we operate on feelings. So if we bring a system, AI system, that is operating only on the basis of data, past data, previous data, whatever data, and it has no empathy, it can actually break the human society. It has the potential to break human society. It actually sounds dangerous, but it is actually dangerous as well. So,
that's why I think that's where design thinking becomes very critical to the whole process.
Very critical, because the moment you try to bring AI into a system, you have a huge responsibility. It can probably have a huge impact than what like I said, when you're thinking from a company point of view, the impact is massive. But when you're thinking from a user point of view, you only think about one individual use case. That's not the way it is. So when you think about bringing AI into the system, you have to think from a point of view which is much beyond the individual user. So like I told, there are three very important parameters that the AI designers must keep in mind. That is organizational behavior, how humans are interacting with humans, how humans are interacting with their fellow humans, behaving in an organization. Cognitive psychology, how are the ways we perceive different aspects, the visuals, the speech, the signals, and behavioral psychology. So these are very important aspects which are supposed to be taken into care before, commercializing or handing over a AI product. Something that doesn't happen, something that didn't happen in the Robo movie also, right? And that's how we got a good movie out of it, right? So jokes apart, I think we are done with the entire session. Humans should not adapt or should not adjust to AI. AI should do the adapting business in the human setup. So that's the whole summary of AI and HCI. A quick evolution of computing. You see, it is only in the 2010s that the AI research actually started picking up, and that is where the entire technology was mobile driven. And you can say after 2010s is what where we saw a lot of integration of cloud computing, HCI, and AI. So earlier maybe they were all separate individual fields, but as we go ahead, we look to integrate more and more different fields of computer science, psychology, design to provide a better user experience. I think I'm done. A quick summary of design thinking. Always try to internalize the problem statement before jumping to the right answer or before jumping to any answer. Get sufficient clarity on the problem questions asked. The user or product requirement may use terms which are unfamiliar to you. Okay, don't hesitate on getting the complete clarity on the question what is asked, right? If suppose you are the question, you're the company and you have to design a solution for a client, the client is telling you to do something, you do not understand the requirement of client. Please ensure that you understand the complete problem statement before getting on to have a discussion with your internal team, right? Neither the problem nor the solution can be too abstract. Everything has to be internalized. Everything has to be broken down into the exact granularity. Second point is focus on user understanding and empathy during the product strategy and roadmap. Like I told you, why of the problem statement has to be completely understood. Disruptive thinking. I gave you a good example of Ola case study, right? You have to dig deeper from the surface, because had Ola only looked at providing an app-based solution, it would never have disrupted this. It would never have disrupted the cab service. It looked at a very unorganized cab service, tried to do a lot more than the app. Because for us as a user, we only see the mobile app. But trust me, guys, the solution is way more beyond the user app, which is happening in the background, just that we are not aware of it. So that is where disruptive thinking comes into play. You have to tap the unsaid problems of the user, the problems with the user himself or herself is not aware of. Quick summary of pervasive computing, AI and HCI. Like I told you, AI is a very complex mathematical advancement which ultimately the goal of AI is to improve the human-computer interaction, right? You can interact with your voice, your gesture or your face. Then, like I told you, the second point, empathy-driven products. The idea is to somehow ensure that the AI is learning and adapting to your behavior. Okay, products which offer customization to users' choice and learn from the user behaviors are more likely to be adopted. Okay, the great example of this point is YouTube and Spotify. They know what type of content you like, healthcare, fitness, and all those things, and accordingly they are giving you a customized product, and that is where the user experience improves drastically. And this is only because of AI, right? Another point is, on an average, 20% of features are only used. So say if there are 100 information available to a user, he will only use 20% of the feature, correct? But because of pervasive computing and AI, they learn from the user behavior, they learn from the past choices and natural inputs like voice, gesture, and video, and which eventually leaves only a few features that the user wants to tweak. I hope I'm clear, right? Because if you have 100 different options in front of you, you will get confused. But say because of AI, you can automate those 20 features. So you will have a lot of lesser features to deal with. That's it. I'm done. This is the most popular apps, the good apps that you use today. They have clean user interface, simple design, good functional design for scalability, and then they have AI to understand the visual behavior and offer customization for better user experience. Right? I'm really sorry I had to run through the last two slides, but these are the summary, and I hope the intent of the session was clear and loud.
It was a lovely session, Nishan. Very informative.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Maybe one more minute. I gave you a design problem for the COVID-19 elevator problem. Anybody wants to share anything quickly?
I think I mean there could be a lot of solutions, but without changing much, I think a very simple thing would be to color or block the two steps in between everyone, so that they could just basically very easily create a little bit of distance, so that people are not coming in absolute physical contact. Like the easiest to start with. Of course, we can go to far more bigger and different solutions, but I think it's the simplest to execute with the current setup of elevators. Escalator.
Ishan,
Okay,
from
ma'am,
my side, this is Shubhangi this side. So
Hi, Shubhangi.
there's a one thing I came up to my mind, that social distancing is one of the cause, right? So besides
Okay.
the load of the elevators, so you could go with 2 or 4 people, right? So when the people entered, so there's some sensors or for the indications that no more than 4 people or 5 people would be there in the elevator. So social distancing should be maintained while taking this parameter.
That's a great again answer, Shubhangi. Thank you. One question back. One question I have back. How do you ensure that only 4 people or 5 people or how no whatsoever people? How do you ensure that?
You can embed the sensors, or you can see. I'm from the computer science background, so you can code, or you can you can code the thing like that. Only 1 or 2 or
Great,
4
great.
people after that. Yeah.
Like
Understood.
being on overload, it can start beeping on half the load. Or also it could have some ceiling sensors where it could demarcate spaces between the 4 blocks. Like if
Understood.
there are 4 people, so just to maintain that gap.
Understood. I think
Maintain a gap. You just there's some technology, or you can just coding or while the using of the technology, you can see that. Like Ishan, you can see that the pervasive computing, right? So a lot of
Mhm.
embedded things you can import while designing the elevator by using the technology.
I have,
That's a great.
yeah,
Yes, sir. Please.
I have a
Please.
small, I mean, you can have seats, for example, in a lift car, you have 4 seats, each, the 2 pair of 2 seats are opposite. I mean, they are back to back,
Okay.
with a barrier in between. See, for example, left side where we have 2 seats, and right side we are having 2 seats. So depending on the seats, only the capacity will be there. For example, 4 seats are there, only 4 people will be there.
That's again one great way, but the problem with seat is again there's a physical contact with the seat, right? So the next person will again sit on the same seat, so that might be issue there. Again, okay, so
Yeah,
I
so after, like you have those revolving doors which only have 4 sections. So if you could just have a revolving stand inside, so it just ensures that only 4 people fit in. And because of the spokes, they are also far away from each other.
great.
Hello.
So I got a great.
Am I audible?
Yeah. Yes, Saurabh, please.
Sorry, I am just interrupting, but again, coming from your learning, the point of view what I have learned, we are again directly dropping the solution.
Solutions, yeah.
That's a great point, Saurabh. I think that was the whole point of asking this question. Because I know you people are really great at coming to problem. So yeah, please, Saurabh, continue. That's what I wanted.
I have to give the solution. I think majorly problem because I think people are understanding the difference between social distancing and everything.
Yeah.
What I am not able to do is that because you have to touch the button, and we are actually trying not because it is a public elevator. We try to not to touch everything. So if sensors have to be inbuilt, so it can be something like a elevator where you can stand and it open by itself without touching a button. So that can be little, I think, helpful.
Yeah, Saurav,
Great.
I totally agree with you. Yeah, this
Great,
is
Saurav.
an
So that can be
In our
having
society, they've already put yellow tape marks inside the elevators, so creating only 4 blocks, and everyone's
Right.
using their keys to basically touch the buttons and do whatever. So
That's
usme
great.
there is some sensor behind the buttons where you don't have to really touch it. If you just wave your hand against it, probably it should capture.
Like Shilpa, we are using like nowadays a biometric system. Hope you have aware about it, right? So nowadays, like Amazon or some more different companies, or you can say different technologies, they are using the face recognitions or palm recognitions, right?
Right.
So
We can
not
have voice
everyone
commands
allows-
also.
Back to the smart cards, I think.
I have seen
We
Smart
voice
can have
card
command
voice
is
and
commands
everything.
then.
Face recognition is also one of them for the biometric and for the palm recognition, right? So palm
but
recognition, you
when I'm
don't
touching the screen,
you don't have to touch any surface. This
That's
is
why
the palm
smart cards, no,
recognition.
the
Yeah.
entry cards that we used to have, so that is okay. You just have to swipe it and it
But
basically catches.
while using any card, you have to touch that machine. But with the palm recognition, you don't have to touch it. There is a sensor that recognizes your palm, right?
No, but you have to
If
place
we
it on
use
the
the
screen,
voice
right?
interaction, then I think that
Yeah,
would be a
voice,
better
then
option.
there is retina
lot of
also, there is face also.
lot of recognitions, biometric recognitions are there. So there's a approximity. Each and every recognitions of have different approximities, right? So it depends at which technology you're going to be used and higher approximities. This is
I
the
think
reason.
coming back to the original point, coming to to reach a solution, we need to go back and actually see what are the actual issues or the problems which are now happening, and it will be very specific to every office space or the kind of work they have. How we
So
design the solution.
for
So, yeah.
this, so you have to understand the user first.
Exactly. So we have to go back and start from scratch.
Yeah.
So I to conclude the entire session there, I really loved this entire interaction between all of you, because that's the whole point of having. We tend to learn more through the Q&A session. So that's really great, and I really know that you people can come up with really great and really creative solutions. But again, my point was a little different. I wanted you to ask few relevant questions. Let me just put it in the chat. Okay.
I think,
So because the problem statement is very, sir, I'm done. I'm
yeah,
done.
no, I'm in fact last half an hour I was actually smiling with eternal happiness. Okay, right? See, I have been a data scientist person. Ishan also, the best project award he got was for a data science transfer learning project, right? But eventually we got hooked on to this interaction design area, right? I started teaching from 2007 something. Okay, but I'm happy to see the maturity he has brought in bashing AI for a while for the sake of humans, okay, right? Or human-centered AI. I was really in awe of that slide which he had, and in fact, the largest happiness I got was with this, constant pinging from. It was almost like a panel discussion. We never said it's a panel discussion, but I was really happy to see, right? Rahman sir, Shilpa madam, right? Shubhangi, I think you are quite young, right? So I'll see you as just like my student. Okay, right? I think I was really happy, right? I think this is the way. I think see, this is what I tell in my classes here, not you people. First year students, right? They'll sit as if they open their mouth, some heavens are going to fall down, right? Not to blame the student, the schooling setup, the discipline it teaches and all. First place, humans should have the comfort zone to interact with fellow human beings in a comfortable way, right? See, we are trying to create human-computer interaction systems. We will never succeed in that if we don't know how to interact with fellow human beings properly, okay, right? So I think Ishan has done a great job, right? In fact, I'll be biased towards AMD and say AMD designs are better than Rollins market. Given my speaker is given that bias. Okay, I think I don't know, somehow I've been blessed right from this almost 15 years of my association with this institute to have great students. You just have to give them the pointer, that's it, right? And then they do as always, right? A typical faculty, right? You do the outer space identification, we identify the deep digging, getting the hands dirty, right? These people are excellent. These are almost the top-notch kids that we get to teach. Okay. I think they are no longer kids or students, but that's the way we see, right? At least our faculty used to call us as kids. So now we are still used to that, right? So Ishan, I think I should personally thank him for agreeing for one more session, taking time off his busy industry schedule, right? I think people have enjoyed it, right? Ishan's email ID will be CEB15I043. I didn't ask from him. This is coming out from my memory. Okay, right? I generally do this recall test in my classes. I have been normally right. Okay. I hope Ishan, I am right?
Yes, sir.
It's almost 3 years since I took attendance for him here. Okay. So this is his email ID. So somebody wants. I'm sure people will be interested to connect with him. Okay. So you are free to email him. Right, and I think knowing Ishan, right, he will go that extra mile to give some pointers or take it forward in whatever requests you have. Okay. So Ishan, really thank you so much. Right.
Thank you so much.
A good sign that a speaker has come with all guns blazing, right, is when you don't, or whatever time you get, right, is never enough. Okay. This is what we face in the class. The night before the class, right, we prepare for 5 pages extra, 10 slides extra, all that stuff, and eventually you don't even cover 20% of what you had in mind. I'm sharing my experience as a teacher. Okay, right. It was really to see. It's almost only 3 years since he passed out from me. Okay, but the maturity has brought in that human-centered AI, the way the AI circles are revolving around humans. That's much better than human circles revolving around AI. I'll use that slide, Ishan. Don't worry.
Sure,
Thanks.
sure.
Excellent. Thank you. It was a great session, right? Okay, right. I think the original plan for this day was actually web usability, right? Because Harini was getting held up today, she had some foreign call, okay, abroad call, overseas client call, right? So I had to do. So I didn't want to miss either Ishan or this. I had to move Hari to the morning, right? Do some adjustment with my sessions, right? So what I'll do, I think it's almost 4-5, right? Okay. So you can possibly have a quick 15 minutes break, right? So 4:20, we'll quickly. There is no practice and all, right? I thought some good case studies. I don't want to sing national anthem for that today, right? The good case studies from usability, what your Nielsen Norman group. I don't know. I hope people have started seeing nngroup.com. Okay, right? If not, start visiting that site because you will get to see several. I think most of whatever I learned practically only came from Nielsen's team. Okay, right? I think the textbooks are fine, but they typically revolve around the bush. Too much wrong. Nielsen is spot on. Okay. And I think there is also, okay, I think I may not have told this so far. There is an excellent book by called Design of Everyday Things by Don Norman. Okay. He's a partner of Nielsen. Right? I don't know if I think there should be some online copy available, whether it is official or not, I leave it to you. Right. I think he says designers must learn to make the designs, right? Or designers must learn to create machines which adapt to humans. It should not be the other way around. Okay. I'll tell you, so I wanted to say some examples of which is the other way around. Okay. Yes, we have. So very good. I'm happy to be a designer of everyday things. Right. And I don't know, I didn't work out. I actually mailed Don Norman. Okay. Because I was a staunch follower. He is like the Professor RKK for me. I mailed him asking for one slot. In the inaugural session, I wanted to have Don Norman. I was really pleasantly shocked or surprised that he, for his age, he's really around 80 or something. Okay. He responded saying, I'm happy that you are reminded of my name for your event. But unfortunately, since he's trying to come up with a design curriculum for the global setup, some educational pedagogy exercise. Okay. He says, I am totally into it. Given my age constraints, I don't want to spend time anywhere else. That is a class of these old faculty here, right? Old faculty or old designers, right? They value human. That's very important here, right? See students also as human. That's what I tell. See students also as human beings, right? Don't know the other side is a robot. Just drill them left, right, and center. Doesn't work out. Okay, enough of what is this? Preaching session. That is what we philosophers have to do, right? We call it doctor of philosophy. So I think we'll take a short break here, 15 minutes, 4:20 you assemble. Maximum 25 minutes, 30 minutes, quick run through of case studies I'll do. Okay. I don't believe in the full theory sessions in the afternoon, but I know today we could not manage because of some speaker constraints and their schedules. Okay. So go have your tea, share the link of the soft copy, please. We will give right? Surely, right? Soft copy, I think you are meaning the slide, right? You will get it. Mercy will upload it into the drive. I hope till yesterday it is there, right?
Yes, sir, it's there.
Yeah, I know. Mercy will do my.
I'm yet to get the slides. So
that is okay. My scholars are almost. Mercy, I think this last session, maybe you can take a break, ask Krishna Sai to help out.
Okay, sir.
And because from last 2 days you have been drilling, right? Or it has been drilling. Right. So 4:15 you assemble back here. It will be, I can give you a surety that it's not just beyond 4:45. Okay. Because I don't want to touch upon those slides again in tomorrow's session where I want to talk on Gessal's theory. So we'll get done with that quickly because certain things may help people, we never know in what situation. Okay. 15-minute break. Ishan, thank you.